Good morning. Welcome back to the podcast, episode 5 of the Hockey Variety Podcast. I've taken a week off here, but I did pump out like 3 episodes last weekend, so yeah, I don't know. I might start like kind of spacing them out next time I have to do that, but at the same time, I wanted a bit of a catalog, I guess, of podcasts just to kind of start things out. I still have not changed the logo because I'm lazy. Not gonna lie, I'm just gonna switch that second H out with a P for the Hockey Variety Podcast. And yeah, we got a pretty busy show in store today. We're gonna talk a bit about the World Juniors that just wrapped up on Thursday with the finals between Canada and Czechia. What a game! Cannot wait to talk about that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the referee shortage in North America right now. I only see North America because I know it's a problem in Canada and I know it's a problem in America. I can't really speak for the rest of the world. And obviously, I mean mainly Europe when I say that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to that or talking about that a little bit more. And then I got a fantasy pick just to kind of wrap things up. Also, speaking of, I'm just going to pause really quick because I got to look something up about that. Yeah, sorry. In the back of my mind there, I was thinking maybe my fantasy pick is actually injured for today, which wouldn't be a good look, I must say. That'd be a good waste of a few minutes on this podcast. But no, my fantasy pick is good to go. And yeah, life's been pretty good. Did some shopping in the city yesterday with my fiance. That was nice. Oh man, I we had lunch at our favorite. This is such a nice moment. We had lunch at our favorite ramen restaurant in town, and we had one of our like first dates there too when we first started dating, and we had the whole restaurant to ourselves. It's a nice small joint. um we had the whole restaurant to ourselves. The music was great. We had such a busy day, and then it was just like such a good time just to chill with the best meal ever. And it was just such a good moment. Honestly, it was like really really nice. I can't even explain it, but just like so much craziness with shopping earlier in the day, and then just a really really nice lunch. So yeah, yesterday was a good day, I must say. And yeah, I got lots of hockey stuff to talk about. Let's get right into it here. So, World Juniors, the Connor Bedard show. I mean, like, I feel like he surpassed expectations in the tournament. I'm not gonna lie. I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but like, what, 24 points in 7 games, I think, something like that. Something very very impressive. Obviously, he broke a bunch of Canada records. I don't think he broke Forsberg's like World Junior total record, but for the record, that for the record, sorry, say the word record one more time, Josh. I think when Peter Forsberg broke that record for like most accumulated points in World Juniors or whatever, I think he had like a bunch against Japan, and this was in like the early '90s. Okay, so I think take that whatever way you want. I mean, obviously Peter Forsberg, obviously one of the better players of all time, Hall of Famer, Hart Trophy winner, Stanley Cup, blah blah blah. Not really too big of a surprise. I think he went number 2 in his draft. He went pretty high in his draft, I believe. But man, wouldn't that be funny if I was totally wrong about that? But anyways, considering how the game is in this day and age, and how skilled players are, and how close like the gap is on the international level, the fact that Connor Bedard is still just dominating. I shouldn't say still, he's only like 17, but the fact that he's just dominating at his age against players that have like already been drafted, some of them already have NHL experience, it's truly impressive. Really, he's been fantastic. He had a great tournament, and I think any team in the NHL right now that's close to tanking, it might be worth going full tank. I'm talking to you, Vancouver. I mean, obviously, I want the Sharks to get him, but teams that are kind of on the cusp, it might be time to roll the dice, right? And we got to see a few other prospects that are going to be pretty high draft picks in the 2023 draft. Obviously Fantilli. I know he didn't like dominate in the tournament, but he looked pretty good. Okay, and don't forget, he hasn't even been drafted yet. He's still got time to develop. So I don't think there's really like any concerns there as well. Same with the guy, with the kid from Czech, Sale. It's spelled Sale, but you know it's not pronounced that way because it's a Czech name. He looked pretty good in the tournament too, and he's going to be a high draft pick as well. Some guys that have already been drafted in this most recent draft look pretty good. Logan Cooley, for example, that Slovak defenseman. Oh man, Macer, I think, the guy that went number 2. He looked good, and same with that defenseman from Czechia, Juracek, I think his name is. He looked pretty good. Yeah, so the future is definitely bright. That was a really good tournament overall. There was just so many good games. There were some great games in the round robin, but once you got into the playoff rounds, oh boy, that was, I think, overall one of the more exciting World Juniors in recent years. Now I know that overtime moment over the summer with Mason McTavish, that is a classic. Honestly, that the save he made on the goal line there, and then Ken Johnson scoring like a minute and a half, 2 minutes later, like that moment was so special. That was so cool. But I think when we're looking at a tournament as a whole, this was a very, very good one of the better ones for sure. And I want to talk about Canada's journey. Really, just a bit of context as well. I am a Canadian. I cheer for Canada, as most Canadians do, right? And I feel like in these international tournaments, like, it's kind of weird when you're watching a sport and you are cheering for the best team. And it is, Canada is always the favorite, right? Like, I when I see hockey, and I think most people agree, there's like the big 5 countries, right? Canada, US, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. I want to say no particular order, but I think most people would agree Canada is usually the favorite to win whatever international tournament, at least in men's hockey. In women's hockey, I think it's a bit closer with Canada and US. I think it's kind of like 1A, 1B, whatever. And then you have, I think the Finnish team is pretty good. I think they're pretty much number 3 on the women's. But in men's hockey, Canada is, I think, most people's number 1. But at the same time, like, if any of those big 5 countries won, I don't think anyone would be too surprised, right? Well, except for Russia, because obviously Russia wasn't in the tournament right now with all the world stuff that's going on right now that I'm not going to talk about. Mainly because I know absolutely nothing about it. I'm purposely not looking into what's going on in Ukraine because, it's terrible, but there's nothing I can do at my level. But I feel like there's a bunch of young Russian hockey players that don't want anything to do with that, and they're not able to play, which sucks. So I hope this gets resolved. Obviously, I want world peace, and I want these kids to have a chance to play. Right? We didn't get to see Michkov play at all, and he's supposed to be a high draft pick as well. I would have loved to see what he could do, especially since maybe the Sharks might end up drafting him. We'll see. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having the Russians back in the tournament eventually. Remember when I said I wasn't going to talk about that, and then I talked about it for like a full minute? Anyways, I don't think anyone would be too surprised if any of those big 5 countries won. But Canada is the favorite. And then you have like your next tier teams like Czechia and Slovakia. I would say they're kind of like that next level. And then you have like maybe the next level down, like Germany, Switzerland, whatever. Latvia maybe could even be in that conversation now. But yeah, and it is a little weird cheering for that number 1 favorite team because I'm totally not used to that. But I also like an underdog. And I was really happy to see the finals being Canada and Czechia because, obviously I'm not rooting against Canada, but it is a little bit of a win-win if you're Canadian and you also like those underdog teams because obviously I was rooting for Canada. Very happy they won. I'm very happy they won in that fashion too because I thought that finals game, it wasn't a snoozer by any means, but I kind of wanted to see that go to overtime. So I was pretty happy with how that went. But at the same time, if Canada ended up losing and Czechia won that game, I think that'd be pretty cool, really. I think countries like Czechia, Slovakia, Germany, I think them getting medals is very important because I think it's just better for the game. It's part of expanding that, that kind of reach in hockey, seeing more countries being able to compete at such a high level. And the Czechs, they haven't been like irrelevant, but it's not the same as they were like in the 90s and the early 2000s when they had Hasek, who was, the best goalie in the world at one point. You have Yager, who was arguably the best player in the world at one point. And then a pretty good supporting cast for Czechia as well, or the Czech Republic back then. So it is good to see them get a medal, see them get a silver medal, getting one goal away from a gold medal. That's definitely an accomplishment. And, the guys on TSN were saying this too, but I think those kids are going to look back on it and really understand, how much of an accomplishment that was. Taking out the Swedes, taking Canada to overtime, not to mention beating Canada in the round robin. And let's start with Canada's journey here. So they lost the first game of the round robin against Czechia. I only caught the third period of that game, but I was texting with a friend of mine, just kind of being like, "What's happening?" And then I saw the third period, and I kind of get it. Canada didn't get good goaltending those first two periods, which is disappointing because I think it was a Sharks prospect in net, Goudreau, I think his name is. But I wouldn't fault him too much because it is one game. He is young. It happens. As a former goalie myself, I wasn't a good goalie by any means, but I get it. Those one-off games, it happens. But I caught the third period, and I gotta say, Canada did not have great shot selection, I thought. There were so many times where they make the pass. They had so much zone time in that third as well. And they make the pass. It's like, oh, you should have fired the one-timer. But no, they kind of dusted off the puck, waited a second, and then shot it or passed it again. Like, there wasn't as much urgency for a team that was down a few goals as well. There wasn't a whole lot of urgency. And I think Canada adjusted their game throughout the round robin. So they lost in regulation to Czechia. Then they had a win over, I think it was Germany, and then they had a win over Austria. I can't remember the order, but confidence booster games, I think. It seems like it happens every year. Canada might lose a game and people freak out. And then, well, look, they won the tournament or they got silver or whatever, right? Like, they're in the mix when the playoffs come around. And at the end of the day, like, the important thing is that you don't get relegated. It really doesn't matter where you finish. Like, didn't Canada finish third in the round robin this time? And they still won the tournament. Like, you just gotta not get relegated. And it's pretty easy to not get relegated when you're Canada, right? So, they had a few confidence booster wins. And then I think their big turning point for the season, or for the tournament, that really established them as the team to beat this year. Not that they weren't before, but I think their win against Sweden in the round robin, that they looked great. And I think that was like, okay, we're Canada. We're in the mix, okay? We're gonna win this thing. I think that game against Sweden was a big statement game. And, I was very happy for them, really. And then the playoff round started. And those playoff rounds were great, really. That was such good hockey watching Team Canada. I think that was like, when you're looking at a full 3-game playoff round for Canada, that had to have been some of the best hockey I've seen in maybe the entire time I've watched this tournament. I'm talking like back to the Carey Price days, the Jordan Eberle days, where the World Juniors was just like kind of at its peak a little bit, So their first game was against Slovakia in the playoff rounds. Slovakia played a heck of a game, really. They looked really good. They kept it so close with a team that was clearly better than them. Slovakia played such a good game, and it was a nail-biter because it went to overtime, and it's like, oh man, and Canada looked so good in overtime. Bedard had so many chances in overtime, and then his OT winner, highlight of the tournament easily. That was insane, just doing it himself, deking out 2 skaters and then the goalie like that. He made it look so easy in a game that was just so tight and so close, and both teams playing pretty good defensively. He was just like, you know what? I'm gonna gonna show everybody up, and I'm gonna win this game. And that was awesome. That was such a good goal. If for whatever reason you haven't seen that goal, go check it out. It was insane. Such a good moment. That's one of those moments I'm gonna like randomly YouTube like 5 years from now, right? There's a few plays where every so often I'll be like, hey, I haven't watched that goal or that save in a long time. You know, I think the Ovechkin on the back goal he scored early in his career. I think that's one I still go back to and be like, how did he do it? You know, I got like the quadratic equation going on in my head. Like, how did he pull that off? You know, and I wouldn't say like Bedard's goal was that level of crazy, but it was still such an impressive goal. So, anyways, they go on to face the U.S. in the semifinals. But earlier that day, there was Czechia and Sweden. Also a crazy game. I had it on in the background while I was working, and Czechia tying it up late and then scoring the winner late in overtime. So crazy. Very happy for them. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't think Sweden looked that good this tournament. I know that's easy to say because they lost, they didn't make the finals or anything, but I watched their game against Finland. I really wish I caught the third, but I was out snowshoeing, unfortunately. But I did catch the first, and Sweden didn't look good, really. And I really question their ability to play a full 60 minutes. But at the same time, I didn't get to watch a whole lot of Sweden. But I think this was a bit of a down year for Sweden, I think. But yeah, Czechia won that game. They got themselves into the finals, and that's a huge accomplishment. Czechia finishing with either a silver or gold. Huge accomplishment just on its own, really. Even a bronze medal for a country like that is an accomplishment, but the fact that they're back in the gold medal game, huge accomplishment. And then we had Canada and US later that game. And that was also a nail-biter. I know you might look at the final score, 6-2? It was actually a lot closer than it looks. And there was an empty netter in there as well. A pretty, strange empty netter, too. I think it was Waugh. Joshua Waugh, he just knocked the guy off the puck at center ice. I don't know, did he have his head down or something? I don't know. It looked like a strangely easy goal for that point in the game for a really good U.S. team as well. The U.S. played pretty good. I think Canada was just a bit better. We got to talk about the goalie interference controversy, if you will. I think that's the big talking point out of that game, first of all. And yeah, so there's 2 goals that got waved off for goalie interference against the U.S. Now, I'm going to talk about the second one first, because there's no question that was goalie interference. He shoved the goalie's pad into the net. You can't do that. It doesn't matter what level of hockey, you can't do that. So, easy review. I don't even think there's a conversation there. Since that was the second goal waved off, the U.S. coach was he stuck up 2 fingers. He was like, that's 2. And it's like, dude, it's an emotional game. I understand why the coach did that. But, dude, the second one was getting waved off, okay? If you think that was a goal, you don't understand how hockey works, really. I'm not saying the U.S. coach doesn't understand how hockey works, obviously. He was just emotional in the moment. Probably very frustrating. But hey, man, if you want to win games, you got to score goals cleanly, okay? Now, let's talk about that first goalie interference call. Now, that first goalie interference call, I recommend rewatching it if you haven't watched it. But pretty much, it was kind of a play in close. The U.S. player at one point during that really quick play there, he had both of his feet in the crease. Okay, and I think that's the strongest argument for it being goalie interference. But at one point, he had both feet in the crease. Pretty, they weren't barely in the crease. Both feet were clearly in the crease. And he does a little wraparound. And to be honest, if he was a little bit further out of the crease, that would have been a pretty nice goal. I'm not going to lie. He did a little wraparound move around the goalie and scored. Okay? And if you watch closely, the U.S. player does make contact with the Canadian goalie's head. His butt kind of comes around and hits the goalie in the head. Not very hard, not concussion worthy or anything, but enough for it to be, I'll say, an annoyance, right? And I think the big argument for why that goal should count is because he doesn't make contact with the goalie's pad or arms. And it kind of seems like there isn't much inhibiting the goalie from making that save. But getting hit in the head is annoying, and it might kind of throw off the play. But I think the biggest piece of evidence there is that he had both feet in the crease, right? And you saw in the finals of Canada and Czechia, there was a play that got blown down because there was a skate in the crease. I don't think that rule, it's a double IIHF rule, I don't think it got called consistently enough, but he had both feet in the crease. Like, and I don't know if that's reviewable or not in terms of the play should have been whistled down, but I think that's a very fair argument. And I want to bring that up because there are some people, I see Ryan Whitney complaining about it when it happened. But again, it's an emotional sport. I get it, right? Some people are saying this call is like egregious. It was like, oh man, that's such a bad call, one of the worst calls ever, blah blah blah. And that's going to tie into talking about the ref shortage later on in this podcast. But it was at worst a 50-50 call, okay? And I was texting my buddy throughout this game too. I was telling him like 60-40, I think this call is going to go Canada's way. And I only say 60-40 because it's international. I think in the NHL that'd be more 50-50, especially in the playoffs. But for double IHF, I think there is a bit more leeway or a bit more of a push for that being waved off, which it was. So I think if you're a US fan and you think this is like totally egregious, he had both feet in the crease and he hit the goalie in the head. Not that hard, I know, but yeah. And I try to think to myself, like, listen, if the roles were flipped, if this happened against Canada, I'd probably be a bit upset. I'd probably be a bit biased. I'm not going to lie. I don't want to fault US fans too much, but you got to understand that was at worst a 50-50 call. Okay? I would say it was a bit more favorable towards Canada in that situation, but it is at worst 50-50. It's not egregious. That wasn't one of the worst calls of all time. Calm down. Okay? Just chill. And that would have made the game 3-3, but at the same time, like, you don't know if the US was going to end up winning that game as a result of that. You don't know if Canada's going to win. Nobody knows, right? Because you can't see the future, okay? I know I don't have, like, the face cam on while I do this podcast, but I'll let you in on a secret. I'm not a genie, okay? I'm not coming out of a lamp, okay? I don't know the future. I'm not psychic. I don't even know if genies are psychic or not, really. I don't. But I don't know the future. Maybe the US would have won. Maybe Canada would have won. I don't know. But it felt like a big moment in that game. But I think the refs made the right call. I really do. Free from bias. I think they made the right call. And that was an exciting game, really. I mean, the US kept it really close. I know the score won't reflect that, but very good game. Two rivals on the international level. It's always fun watching those two teams play. And I'm definitely not a US hater. I know there's some Canadian fans that... I think depending on the situation, like, I like seeing the US thrive as well. There isn't any countries that I hate by any means. And I think that, as the years go on, the US, they're more and more in the mix. They've gotten really good. That country has gotten very good at developing their players. And the gap between Canada and the rest of the world, it's starting to narrow a bit. And I thought the United States, they had a great tournament. And look out, because next year they're going to be back in it. They really are. And then the finals, Canada versus Czechia, another good game. It was 2-0 Canada after 2 periods. It was 1-0 after 1, 2-0 after 2. And, after those first 2 periods, I was like, okay, we had 2 really exciting games for Canada. This one is going to be a normal game. Okay, I kind of had that feeling like, Canada, they're going to play a full 60 minutes. They're going to win this game. It's going to be not boring by any means. I mean, it's the finals. It's not boring, but it wasn't like crazy exciting compared to the other 2 games, I would say. But in the third, I mean, part of me was like, I wouldn't mind seeing Czechia like get within one, kind of keep it a bit closer, right? Well, they didn't just get one; they got two. They got two in the third period, tied the game, and I was like, okay, we have a hockey game. This, and like I said, I would have been happy with either result. Obviously, I'm cheering for Canada, but if Czechia won gold, that would have been pretty cool. And they played a great tournament. Czechia's goalie, oh man, what was his name? He has a really cool name. I wish I could remember. But I hope some NHL teams give him a look because he looked great. And I think he was good in the summer too, in the last tournament. Um, and I know with how these junior players perform in this tournament, at an NHL level, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But honestly, I think Czechia's goalie really made a name for herself. Such a good name that I can't even remember what it is. Okay, the goalie's name is Chanik, and yeah, I looked it up because I was tired of sounding like an idiot on the podcast. So yeah, Chanik. I definitely think that some NHL teams should be giving him a look because he looked great in back-to-back years now. He might have even played in this tournament 3 years. I'm not sure, but he looked great. He had another good game. Canada looked pretty dominant those first two periods, and I think he was a big reason why it got to where it did. So yeah, overtime. Yeah, it was a good overtime. What can I say? Dylan Gunther getting the OT winner. Another player that I don't think he got quite enough attention because of Bedard, but he has some NHL experience and he looks great. Really, I think that's a really good sign for the Coyotes. Obviously, I want the Coyotes to turn things around, and I think the future is bright. Really, I don't even know if Bedard got a point in that game, but who cares, really? Canada, I think they showed, they have their depth. Shane Wright looked really good in that game too, I thought, and I think he needs that confidence booster. It was announced that he's going back to juniors, which I think is the right call. Now, I'm no expert at player development, but I think, I think it's better that he's getting more games. And this is a future, top six forward. He should be playing games where he's in the top six. Nothing against Seattle, but I think just NHL teams as a whole, they need to be a bit more open to keeping players in juniors, keeping players in the NCAA, or even the AHL, or even over in Europe, just for a year after the draft. And it depends on the player, of course. I think Slavkovsky being in the NHL this year, I think that's the right call. Even if he's not always on the top line, I think for a player like him that already has quite a bit of experience against men, I think that's the right call. I really do. But with Shane Wright, I think he just needs more game time, really. And it was also announced that he's going to get traded to a team that's in contention for the Memorial Cup. Wouldn't that be cool if he went to wherever Bedard is? That'd be pretty crazy. Was it Regina Pats? That'd be nuts. But I don't know if that trade could work out, if it's an OHL, WHL thing. I don't know. But I think it's the right call, But yeah, going back to the gold medal game here. Canada looked great. Czechia looked great. It was a great game. Just a good gold medal game. Big shout out to Canada's goalie, Milic. He looked really good all tournament. I think if he managed to pull off the shutout in the finals there, I think Bedard was tournament MVP hands down, but I think if Milic managed to pull off the shutout, which he almost did, I think he would be in that MVP conversation. I don't know. Really, I might regret saying that on the podcast here, but because Bedard was insane, really. So much hype. He's living up to the hype. Easy number one in this year's draft. No question. And whichever team manages to get him in the lottery, that this could be a big turning point for a franchise. They could really be a Stanley Cup champion within the next few years, even. You look at Chicago getting Kane and Taves and, getting Keith later in one of those drafts as well. Yeah, and you have to draft well too, right? You look at Edmonton. Does Edmonton really have a lot of home runs outside the first round? Not really. I mean, David was a layup. Draisaitl was a layup, right? Like, easy. And then outside of that, it's like, hey, you know, what you doing, right? Like, so, anyways, this isn't. I'm not talking about Edmonton today, but whichever team gets them, that's gonna further escalate their rebuild. And look out at this year's trade deadline because I think we're gonna see. Well, we'll see. There's some big names that are rumored to get moved, but at the same time, what team has cap space to bring in a Bo Horvat or a Jacob Chikrin, right? Like, I think we're going to see some big moves, but we're also going to see a lot of cap gymnastics. Anyways, let's talk about the ref shortage in North America. This is now the second time on this podcast I've talked about this, and I think it's really interesting to talk about because I think we have a problem in the world right now. And I'm going to be talking about this in future podcasts, guarantee. So there is a shortage of referees at all levels of hockey, minor hockey, adult hockey, even higher up as well. Though, refs will get more opportunities at the junior level and, I mean, even as high as like the professional leagues, once they've built a resume and proved that they are good refs. But you need refs at the minor hockey level, and as someone that plays men's hockey, men's rec hockey, we need refs at that level too, right? And listen, I'm going to come across as, a ref defender and all of that. And here's the thing. Everyone should be, to some degree, a ref defender in the grand scheme of things. Because hear me out. If we don't have officials, we don't have hockey games. Right? And whether you're a fan or a player or a parent, you want hockey games to happen, right? And if we don't have officials, we're not going to see hockey games anymore. And that's huge, especially at the minor hockey level, okay? I didn't always have the best experiences in minor hockey growing up. I'm not going to lie. Didn't really play with the nicest kids all the time. But I do have fond memories on the ice. And I've built those skills to be an adequate hockey player now. And now I'm in my 30s and I'm enjoying hockey as much as I ever have. And part of that is having games when I was a kid and having games now. People should be supportive of referees as a whole. And I say as a whole because there are a few bad refs. Obviously, right? Most refs are pretty good refs. I think we forget that, but I'm not going to deny there are some crappy refs out there, okay? And there's a few in my rec league that, I think there's a conflict here because there's a few refs that should not be reffing. They shouldn't be. But here's the thing. The league might not want to get rid of these guys because they got no one to replace them. I can see the conflict there, right? It's tough. And that's the thing. There's no room to fire refs because there's such a shortage of refs, right? Like, from a league's perspective, they kind of need everybody, right? So, and I wanted to bring this up because I feel like lately there has been a lot more ref hatred as a whole. I think we've kind of normalized that they are the bad guys and the hockey players are the good guys. When in fact, there shouldn't be any good guys or bad guys, okay? We need refs just like we need players, right? So there shouldn't be that conflict. And I get that refs make mistakes. They're human. And the game at the NHL level is getting faster. And probably at the youth levels as well, let's be honest. But, they're going to make mistakes. They're humans, right? And I think people, and we saw this in the World Juniors a lot, there was a lot of ref you suck chants, which the refs didn't suck that tournament. The refs, they did really well that tournament overall. The fans it's getting to the point where they're booing the refs when they make the right call. They just don't want to see their team get penalized. sound like a bunch of babies, really. Um, we shouldn't be against the refs, okay? And I get that it's an emotional game. I have freaked out at refs before. Not like full blast, but there might have been a few times where I might have said something to a ref that I regret. Nothing bad enough to get penalized, but just be like, hey, I didn't like that call. Or hey, that person dived. And, maybe I regret it, maybe I don't, but here's the thing, like, it's an emotional game. I get that. But we need refs. We need to stop seeing refs as the bad guy. So, anyways, and just like, if you're wondering what those two refs in my men league, who I don't think they're doing a good job, what are they doing exactly? One of them, he's very biased, it seems. It's very much like a power. He wants that power. He wants to be the big man, right? Like, the guy who, maybe they weren't cool in high school and now they get all this power, right? And he's sworn at our team. Apparently he flipped off one of my players. Like, terrible. One of my players got a suspension because the ref apparently skated into him. I wasn't at that game, and it was that same ref. And it's like, this guy shouldn't be reffing. But again, there's a shortage. The league can't really get rid of this guy. And then the other guy, he's just old and he misses obvious calls, right? And there was a big one where one of our players had a breakaway, clearly taken down from behind. And there was no call. Like, there was no way you could, like, it was an unmissable call. It was a trip. Or it might have been a hook. I can't remember. It was something, though. Even if it wasn't a penalty shot, though I think it was a penalty shot, even if it wasn't a penalty shot, it was a 2-minute minor. It was an impossible call to miss, and he missed it. And I think there was that bias too. I think he intentionally missed it because he doesn't like our team. We know this guy doesn't like our team. It is a fact. I'm not going to get into reasons why, but yeah, So I know there are refs that do a poor job out there, but most don't. So in this next section of the podcast, I'm finally going to get into what I want to talk about. What can people do to help this problem? Okay. And I know there's the big picture of incentivizing people to be a ref. Maybe they don't get paid enough. Maybe, but I think the big thing is not that people are afraid, but yeah, there's no incentive, right? Like, you're not making enough money to justify it, considering people are being jerks to refs overall. So here's what you can do. And I'm just going to kind of go through like a few different categories of people in the hockey world. Parents, players, coaches, whatever. And I'm just going to talk about what you can do to support officials and support people wanting to be officials, okay? So, yeah, first one I'm going to do, and because I think this is the easiest one, this is the least complicated one, is parents, okay? So, parents who are watching their kid play minor hockey. First of all, it is very important that you are at the game supporting your kid. I think that's very important. And I think the goal is to have a bunch of parents in the crowd with a mutual respect for each other, mutual respect for both teams and the refs and the coaches and the timekeeper, and regardless of the result, right? Even if the kid loses, even if your kid gets a call against them, there is a mutual level of respect and everyone's having a good time watching their kids play. Okay? I think that is the goal, and I think that's agreed upon. Here's the problem. There are some crazy parents out there. And by crazy parents, I don't mean cheering your kid on, okay? I think yelling at the top of your lungs, "Woo, go Jimmy!" It may be obnoxious, but it's positive. And that's okay, really. I hear stories about my grandmother cheering my uncles on at baseball games, and apparently she was really loud, but it was positive. It was all positivity. She's not starting fights. She's not insulting other kids or the ref or the coach or whatever. It was positive. And yeah, it's obnoxious, but I don't think that's bad for the sport, right? Just like, don't embarrass your kid too much. And like in hindsight, my dad watched most of my games, right? And long story short, he did a great job, I think, at supporting me. I'm very happy. But I remember as a kid, like, I was thinking, man, my dad's not quite as involved when he's watching my games. He doesn't really look like he's paying too much attention. He's talking to the other dads, probably about flying planes or whatever. But I look at it as an adult now. I look at it in hindsight, and I'm like, my dad was a pretty perfect hockey parent. I mean, he got me to games, and he didn't get in trouble. Like, he wasn't obnoxious. He wasn't insulting anyone. I think by just keeping his mouth shut, if you know what I mean, I think that alone made him a good hockey parent. In hindsight. Um, and then when my mom would come watch, she would be a bit more involved, I thought, or a bit more engaged in watching the game. But simply because my dad's not a hockey fan. My mom isn't the biggest hockey fan, but enough that she'll pay attention. Or at least look like she's paying attention. So I think as a parent, the easiest and most clear thing you can do is just don't insult other kids, which is just kind of messed up, right? And also by freaking out at other kids and other parents or coaches or whatever, you're also embarrassing your kid, which any kid or anyone that's been a kid and has been embarrassed, which I think we all have, it's not a good feeling. And it's an easy solution. Just keep your mouth shut or keep it positive, right? As a parent, I think that's what you can do. Again, it's very important that we have parents at hockey games supporting their kids. That's huge. But be mindful of your behavior. Okay? All right. So as a coach, what can you do? Now I heard this on the Rink Shrinks podcast. Excellent podcast as well. They kind of do the same thing I'm doing here. Obviously they did it first. I'm not taking credit for that or anything, but a bit more variety on that show. And they talk about minor hockey. They talk about youth hockey. They talk about hockey at all levels. And one thing they mentioned that refs can do is just at the start of the game, go over to each bench and just introduce yourself. Don't give your name or anything, but just be like, hey, how's it going? And, let's play a clean game and all of that. And it sets a good tone for the game. And I think as a coach, or in my case, in my men's league, as a team rep or a team captain, go over to the ref at the start of the game, before the game, during warm-up, and be like, hey, we're going to have a good game, we'll keep it clean. And even if we don't keep it that clean, at least we've set a good tone. And I think that's something a coach can do as well. Be like, hey, we're going to keep it clean, we're going to have a good game. And even if it doesn't go that way, at least you made the effort. And I think that's a good practice, okay? Talk to the ref. If you're a coach or a team ref or a team captain, go to the ref before the game, during the warm-up, and just be like, hey, we're going to have a good game. I have a good feeling about this. And that's it. That's all you got to do. Even if you don't like the refs, I think it sets a good tone, okay? Now, what can you do as a player? Now, that's a bit tricky, because I know it's an emotional game, and I know a lot of people's responses to refs are entirely reactionary, right? You get called for something which maybe you didn't really do, maybe it was incidental or whatever, and you might argue that call right away. And I know it's tough to keep your emotions in check, but you just gotta find a way to keep it together, really. And you want to be a team player. If you take an extra penalty because you're barking at the ref, that's detrimental to your team. Okay? Your team is now going to get penalized because you did that. So you just got to keep your emotions in check. It's tough, I know, but it's good practice. You've got to make an effort. Obviously, cleaning up your game is another good thing you can do, but I get it. Some guys, they play that style, and I've taken my fair share of penalties too. I'm by no means a goon, right? Nobody on my team is a goon, though we like to kind of chirp each other when someone gets a penalty or whatever. And yeah, now when it comes to how you behave with the other team, it's tough, right? Because you gotta stand up for your teammates too. Especially if the refs aren't calling something. It's tough, really. A lot of it is just regulating your emotions, though. And really understand that, again, if it weren't for the refs, we wouldn't have a game. And we love this game. So I think hockey players need to understand that. Okay? Lastly, what can you do as a hockey fan? First of all, and whether that be like you're watching on TV, you're responding to things on social media, or you're at a live game. First of all, if you're watching TV, if you're watching hockey on TV or on the internet or whatever, who cares? Really? Like, swear at your TV all you want. Really, like, who cares? It's your TV. Honest, like, if it's affecting your mental health, obviously, like, rethink things. Or if you're freaking out at your TV in front of your kid and being that, setting that example for your kid, obviously you shouldn't do that. But really, like, freaking out at your TV doesn't have as big of an impact, obviously. Okay. Now on social media, I think by responding to calls that weren't that bad, or being like, this ref should be fired, or blah, 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 I think that's detrimental to the game too. Really, I think there's way too much negativity on the internet when it comes to hockey. Probably all sports, but I noticed this in hockey. Just don't look at the comment sections, guys. Like, there's nothing positive, Like, you see a post about, like, something positive, like promoting the game, like hockey is for everyone, and then you just hear, like, these terrible things in the comments, just being like, just keep it about hockey, just blah, like, people that are probably just too dumb to realize they're discriminating, or too dumb to realize that they sound like complete buffoons, really. Why would you not want the game to be inclusive? And the fact that you're kind of like passive aggressive sort of insulting that, it's like you look like an idiot, right? And yeah, I think social media plays a big part in why people are disliking refs more than usual lately. And just what can I say? Just try to not do that, really. Even leaving a like on those comments, like, you might want to rethink things, because we need referees. We need referees. There's no game if there's no ref. Understand that, please. Okay? I'm not saying every ref is the best ref. I'm not saying you have to like every referee, but we need them. We need good ones. We need kids and teenagers to understand that maybe they should be a ref, because we need them. That's it, right? And as for fans in live hockey settings, listen, the ref you suck chance, it needs to stop. Especially when it's not a bad call. Really. If someone on the home team takes a penalty and it was a clear trip or a clear roughing or whatever, just shut up. That's it. If the crowd is starting a ref you suck chant, just don't participate in it, really. Even if it's egregious. Well, if it's egregious, I don't know, right? But just calm down. Just calm down. That's honestly like the moral of the story, or the moral of this section of the podcast. Just calm down, right? And one last point I want to make, just going back to coaches. Like, I was a referee for a year. I think I was 12 or 13. I was a referee for 1 year. And I quit. And I quit because, well, one, I wasn't enjoying it that much. But I remember there was one moment that I look back on. I was reffing, like, little guys. Like, these kids are, like, 6 or 7. Like, they're little, right? And I was the only ref at that game. The puck was in the corner, and something happened behind me that I missed. I don't even remember what it was. Maybe it was, like, some kind of, like, maybe a punch or something. I don't know. And the ref, or not the ref, I'm the ref. The coach on one of the teams is freaking out at me. He's yelling at me. I don't know this guy. He is losing it. And I'm 12 years old. Okay? Like, forget that it's hockey. You have a grown adult, a stranger to me, freaking out at me. And I'm 12, and I'm just like, like, what are you doing? I'm scared, right? Like, what's going on? And the whole game, I'm just like, okay, I can't miss anything because this guy will freak out at me. And that was like the big turning point of like, okay, I'm not going to be a ref, right? And like I was chatting with one of my students who's he refs hockey right now, and he's like, what, 13, 14, right? And he kicked he kicked a coach out of a game because of that. And I was really happy for my student. I was really proud of him. I was like, good for you, man. Stand up for yourself. Yeah, like coaches can't do that. That's a penalty. You did the right thing. And that's awesome. And I'm not saying kids who are refs or teenagers who are refs need to abuse their power, but they also need to understand that there's a line and that coach crossed the line. And I'm very happy that he made that decision to kick him out of the game. That's awesome. Refs need to still be empowered without abusing their power, right? The refs in our men's league that aren't doing a great job, it's because they're abusing their power. You got to understand that we need the refs. That's it. We need the officials in order to play the game. I'm sure you're probably sick of hearing that. Let's talk about fantasy hockey. Okay, wrapping up the podcast. Again, hey, we got to a full hour once again. How about that? Going back to the hockey variety hour. Maybe I shouldn't have rebranded after all. I think the last one was an hour too, so yeah. Okay, fantasy pick for today's episode is Philip Gustafsson. So first of all, just ignore this, okay? Just ignore that, okay? Right now on the Yahoo app, he is not listed as injured. However, Marc-Andre Fleury, the other goalie for the Minnesota Wild, in what seems like a 1A, 1B tandem, as you can see, Gustafsson is having a pretty good season. Great save percentage. I think he's won 8 of his last 9. I don't have the full stats there, but I think below that Anaheim game on the screen, I think he has another win. So, yeah. Quality starts most of the time as well. Quality starts being save percentages above 900. And here's the thing. Marc-Andre Fleury has just taken a personal leave from the Minnesota Wild at the time of recording this. First of all, I hope things go okay for Marc-Andre Fleury. I'm a big fan of his. I wasn't always a fan of his because Pittsburgh and San Jose fan, right? But he's become one of my favorite goalies, and I really hope him and his family, and I hope everything's okay. I wish all the best to Marc-Andre Fleury. I hope everything gets resolved, and I hope there's a happy ending out of whatever he's going through. However, that doesn't change the fact that because Marc-Andre Fleury is on leave, Philip Gustafsson will get more starts. Now, I know he was fighting an illness, hence why there's this little thing here. He should be in Sunday's game. And I hope so, because I am not looking good in this week's matchup in the league that I'm first in. And I kind of threw a Hail Mary. I dropped Brock Nelson for Tom Wilson, who's back in the lineup for Washington. And I put Fleury on the IR so I could get Gustafsson, because I know Gustafsson's going to get a lot of starts here while Fleury is out. So he's having a good season. I recommend picking him up if you have room for a goalie. If you're rocking 3 goalies right now, maybe don't. But if you have 2, or you're kind of doing the drop one, pick one up thing, maybe hang on to Gustafsson for the next week or 2 here, because he is playing pretty good. The Wild is looking pretty good as well. They're picking up a lot of wins. They're right back in the playoff conversation again. And yeah, he's going to get a lot of starts. I highly recommend that you take a look at him. Also, I did not know he was drafted by Pittsburgh until looking at the screen right now. That is interesting. It's crazy how some goalies just get passed around all the time, right? And, I think some goalies, they really need that stability. But at the same time, a lot of goalies don't get that shot, right? Like, you look at Jordan Binnington and the journey he made to get into the NHL. Sometimes there just isn't space for a goalie to come up. So I'm happy to see Gustafsson having a good year in Minnesota. I like the goalie. I wish him all the best. And yeah, it'd be cool to see Minnesota go on a run this year, really. That's a team that's really needed a conference finals or Stanley Cup finals run. That being said, there's a lot of really good teams in the Central. I mean, Dallas looks great. Winnipeg's had a good bounce back season. Colorado is not even in a playoff spot, I think, right now. And they're Colorado. They're probably going to get back into the playoff mix before the end of the season. The Central is close this year. So I don't know if Minnesota will come out of the Central or even come out of the West after that, but we'll see. It'd be cool. It would definitely be cool to see Minnesota have some success. And they've got some good pieces there. Kirill Kaprizov is a monster. He is insane. I like to think of him as McDavid light. Though I think like the gap is a bit closer than calling him McDavid light. Like he is one of the best players in the league. Not as good as McDavid, obviously, but maybe a little underrated just because Minnesota isn't a huge market. But anyways, Gustafsson, highly recommend picking him up if he is still available in your league. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to episode 5 of the podcast. I had fun doing this. Thanks for listening to me rant about referees. Again, this is a big problem in the game that I think needs to get addressed. It really does. And I think there are things that you can do, whether you're a fan or a player or a coach or a parent or whatever. I think there's things you can do to help be a solution to this problem because we need officials. Anyways, if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We're trying to get to 10 subscribers before 2023 is over. I think we'll get there, but if you could leave a subscribe, that'd be great. Really, really appreciate that. Probably going to like once a week or so from here on. Life has gotten busy again, as expected. Coming back from my winter break, started my grad studies again, just getting really busy. But I do enjoy this podcast. It's a good way to vent some of my frustrations in the game right now, let's say. But yeah, I'm hoping to talk a bit more about some current events in the NHL. So, try to keep it a bit more current. But, we're all about variety on this podcast. So, NHL, fantasy hockey, beer league hockey, hockey history. You guys know by now that's something I like to talk about. And yeah, feel free to check out some of my previous episodes as well, because I talk about stuff that isn't too out of date now, right? I talk about a lot of history, so check that out if you haven't already. And yeah, have a good week. Talk to you, hopefully next week. So yeah, peace.